as the city's ruthless syndicate boss strode past the sneering supermodels and heiresses who had just branded me a beached whale. A graveyard silence fell over the room. 300 of New York's most dangerous elites watched him pause before me, take my hand, and declare, "I choose her." Here is the story of how it all began. My name is Kara Higgins. I am a 28-year-old senior forensic accountant for Grant Thornton, and I never asked to be dragged into the underworld. My life was spreadsheets, black coffee, and trying to navigate a world that constantly reminded me I took up too much space. At a solid size 18, I was a fat woman in a city that worshipped the painfully thin. I had long ago learned to armor myself in sharp blazers and sharper sarcasm. But nothing could have prepared me for the diamond-studded snake pit of the Pierre Hotel Grand Ballroom on a freezing Tuesday in November. I wasn't there to party. I was there because I was summoned. 3 weeks prior, I had been auditing a mid-level shipping conglomerate called Apex Logistics. To anyone else, it was a boring ledger of freight costs and warehouse leases in Red Hook. To my trained eyes, it was a glaringly obvious money laundering front. I tracked a missing $4 million through a labyrinth of Delaware LLCs straight to the personal offshore accounts of a man named Vincent Maroney. I flagged it to my managing partner, expecting a quiet internal review. Instead, I received a thick, cream-colored envelope delivered to my desk by a man in a bespoke suit who looked like a former Constellis military contractor. Inside was a gold-embossed invitation to the Castellano family charity gala, along with a handwritten note. "Ms. Higgins, you found my rat. Bring your brilliant mind to the Pierre on the 12th. D.C." D.C. was Nicholas Castellano, head of the Castellano Syndicate, the man who quietly controlled the eastern seaboard's ports, half the real estate in Hudson Yards, and a private army of men who didn't exist on government databases. And so there I was, standing near a towering ice sculpture of a swan, feeling entirely, horrifyingly, out of place. The ballroom smelled of old money, Baccarat Rouge 540, and danger. The women in the room looked like they had been genetically engineered in a laboratory designed to destroy my self-esteem. They were razor-thin, wrapped in custom Versace, Dior, and Suhair Murad. They moved with the predatory grace of apex predators, sipping Dom Perignon and scanning the room for weakness. I was their prime target. I was wearing a deep emerald wrap dress I had bought off the rack at Nordstrom. It fit me well, hugging my heavy curves and emphasizing my waist. But in this room of haute couture and zero body fat, I might as well have been wearing a garbage bag. I tried to make myself small, tucking myself behind a floral arrangement of white orchids. But in this world, weakness attracts sharks. Did the catering staff get lost? The voice was like shattered glass, sharp, musical, and designed to draw blood. I turned to see Vanessa Lombardi. She was the daughter of Nicholas's top earner, a woman who had been groomed since birth to sit at the right hand of a Mafia king. Beside her was Chloe DeLuca, another Mafia princess with cheekbones sharp enough to cut cocaine. "I'm a guest," I said, keeping my voice level. I gripped my clutch so tightly my knuckles turned white. Vanessa looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my thick thighs and full hips. Her lip curled in genuine disgust. "A guest? Nicholas's charity must be doing a Feed the Whales initiative this year. Honestly, look at you. Are you supposed to be wearing that, or did you just eat the woman who originally bought it?" Chloe let out a high-pitched, cruel laugh, drawing the attention of several other women nearby. Soon, a circle of glittering, hostile socialites had formed around me. "It's actually pathetic," Chloe sneered, stepping closer. "This is a closed event, sweetheart. For our kind of people. Not for whatever this is. You're sweating. You're taking up half the aisle." Nicolas Castellano is arriving in 10 minutes, and the tradition is that he selects a partner for the first dance. It dictates the hierarchy for the whole year. We can't have a giant, sweaty pig ruining the aesthetic of the VIP section. My cheeks burned with a heat so intense it brought tears to the back of my eyes. This was my entire life, distilled into one nightmare. The unearned confidence of cruel, thin women weaponizing their bodies against mine. "I have a personal invitation," I managed to say, my voice trembling just a fraction. "From who?" "The kitchen." Vanessa stepped directly into my personal space. She was holding a flute of dark red Cabernet. "You don't belong here. You are fat, you are ugly, and you are embarrassing yourself. Leave before I have security throw you out onto 5th Avenue. To punctuate her point, Vanessa smoothly and deliberately tilted her glass. The dark red wine cascaded down the front of my emerald dress, blooming into an ugly dark stain across my chest and stomach. The circle of women gasped, and then a chorus of malicious giggles erupted. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Vanessa purred, her eyes shining with triumph. "But honestly, it's an improvement. It distracts from your waistline. Now, waddle out the back door before I make a scene." I stood there, dripping with wine, humiliation choking me like a vice. For a second, the old, insecure Cara, the girl who spent her teenage years hiding in baggy hoodies, wanted to run. I wanted to flee to the nearest subway, go back to my cramped Brooklyn apartment, and cry until I threw up. I looked around at the mocking faces, the sneering waiters, the absolute disdain in their eyes. But then I remembered who I was. I was Cara Higgins. I had single-handedly untangled a financial web that the FBI couldn't crack. I had found a thief stealing millions from a monster. I had a brain that these vapid plastic women couldn't even comprehend. I didn't run. I reached into my clutch, pulled out a tissue, and calmly dabbed at the wine. "You're going to need more than a tissue, Shamu," Chloe mocked. Before I could fire back, the venom building on my tongue, a heavy, suffocating silence dropped over the grand ballroom. The string quartet in the corner abruptly stopped playing. The clinking of glasses ceased. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet by 10 degrees. The heavy mahogany doors at the entrance had opened. Nicolas Castellano had arrived. I didn't walk in. He invaded the space. He was flanked by 4 massive men with earpieces. But no one was looking at them. Every eye in the room was pinned to Nicolas. He was 34, tall, with broad shoulders, tailored to lethal perfection in a charcoal Brioni suit. I wasn't pretty like a Hollywood actor. His face was hard, angular, etched with the violence of his world. A faint scar cut through his left eyebrow, and his dark eyes held the absolute, terrifying stillness of a man who held life and death in his hands on a daily basis. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea. He moved with a slow, deliberate cadence, commanding total submission from the room. Instantly, the venomous energy radiating from Vanessa and Chloe evaporated, replaced by a desperate, hungry desperation. This was the moment. The first dance. Whoever Nicholas pulled to the center of the room would secure millions in contracts and unbreakable protection for their family's rackets. Vanessa hastily fixed her hair, her chest heaving as she shoved past me, stepping to the edge of the velvet rope dividing the VIP section. She struck a pose, angling her thin body to catch the chandelier light, a predatory smile stretching across her face. "Watch and learn, fatty," Chloe whispered to me, before stepping into line next to Vanessa. Nicholas began his walk down the center aisle. Heavy hitters, capos, and politicians nodded to him in deep respect, but he ignored them all. His dark, calculating gaze was scanning the crowd, looking for someone. He approached the VIP section. Vanessa's smile widened, and she actually took a half step forward, extending her hand slightly. "Nicholas," she purred, her voice dripping with practiced seduction. "It's been too long." Nicholas didn't even look at her. He didn't break his stride. He walked straight past Vanessa Lombardi's extended hand, leaving her hanging in the air like a fool. A collective gasp rippled through the front row. He bypassed Chloe. He bypassed the daughter of a Russian oligarch. He stopped directly in front of the white orchid arrangement. He stopped directly in front of me. Up close, Nicholas Castellano was terrifying. He smelled of rain, expensive tobacco, and pure, filtered power. He stood a full head taller than me, and as he looked down, his gaze locked onto mine. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. He looked at my face, flushed with embarrassment. He looked at my emerald dress, clinging to my heavy thighs and full hips, and then his eyes zeroed in on the massive dark stain of wine ruining the fabric. The silence in the ballroom was so complete I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Nicholas's jaw tightened. The subtle shift in his expression was so violently angry that two of his bodyguards immediately shifted their hands to their jackets. "Who did this?" Nicholas's voice was a low, gravelly baritone that vibrated in my chest. It wasn't a question. It was a court summons. I swallowed hard. "It was an accident, Mr. Castellano." "I don't believe in accidents, Ms. Higgins," he replied softly. He knew my name. Hearing it in his mouth sent a shock wave down my spine. Nicholas slowly turned his head. His dark eyes swept over the circle of women who had been torturing me. They were all frozen, their faces pale with sudden, dawning terror. His gaze landed on Vanessa, who was still holding her half-empty glass of Cabernet. "Vanessa," Nicholas said. Her name sounded like a death sentence. "Dear Nicholas," she stammered, all her previous bravado melting into pathetic panic. "It was nothing. The clumsy cow just got in my way. She doesn't even belong here. I was just trying to clear the area for you." Nicholas stepped away from me, closing the distance between himself and Vanessa. The crowd shrank. "You tried to clear the area," he repeated, his voice dangerously calm. "Of the woman who saved my syndicate $4 million. Of the woman who untangled a web of theft that my best enforcers couldn't find." Vanessa's mouth opened and closed like a dying fish. I didn't know." "No, you didn't," Nicholas interrupted, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "Because all you know how to do is spend your father's blood money on dresses that hang off your bones while contributing nothing of value to our world. Miss Higgins has more intelligence, more loyalty, and more worth in her little finger than your entire bloodline." Vanessa looked like she had been physically struck. Tears of utter humiliation welled in her eyes. Chloe backed away, desperately trying to disassociate herself from the fallout. Nicholas didn't raise his voice, but it carried perfectly across the dead, silent room. If anyone in this room ever speaks to Kara Higgins with anything less than absolute respect, they will answer to me personally. Do you understand, Vanessa? Yes, Nicholas, she whispered, her face burning crimson as 300 elites watched her destruction. Nicholas turned his back on her, dismissing her entirely. He walked back to me. The anger in his eyes vanished, replaced by a warm, intense heat that made my breath catch. He didn't care about my size. He didn't care about the wine stain. He reached out, his large, calloused hand gently taking mine. The electricity of his touch shocked my system. He looked at the crowd, raising our joined hands, and delivered the words that would change my life forever. I choose her. The decoration echoed through the Pierre Hotel. The women who had mocked me went violently silent. The men in the room stared in shock before hastily averting their eyes in respect. Come with me, Kara, Nicholas murmured, gently pulling me toward the center of the dance floor. Let's give them something to really talk about. The string quartet, having recovered from the sheer shock of Nicholas's outburst, immediately launched into Dmitri Shostakovich's Waltz No. 2. The sweeping, melancholic notes filled the grand ballroom, a stark contrast to the thick, violent tension hanging in the air. Nicholas pulled me into his chest. His right hand, heavy and warm, rested firmly on the curve of my waist, his thumb tracing the fabric of my ruined emerald dress. His left hand engulfed mine. I had never danced a waltz in my life. The closest I had ever come to a formal dance was a disastrous high school prom, where I had hidden in the bathroom for 2 hours. I don't know what I'm doing, I whispered frantically, staring up at his sharp jawline. I'm going to step on you. You follow my lead, Kara, Nicholas replied smoothly, stepping forward and forcing me to glide backward with him. Just like you followed the money trail through 3 shell companies and a Credit Suisse dummy account. You are the smartest person in this room. Walking in a circle shouldn't terrify you. Walking in a circle with the most dangerous man in New York terrifies me, I shot back, though I was already falling into the rhythm of his movements. He was leading with such absolute authority that my body simply obeyed. Nicholas's lips twitched upward into a rare, devastating ghost of a smile. Good. Fear keeps you sharp, but you never need to fear me. We spun past the ice swan, past the staring eyes of the syndicate elites. I could feel the burning glares of the women on the periphery. Vanessa Lombardi was standing by a pillar, looking utterly broken. Her father, a notoriously brutal capo named Silvio, whispering furiously into her ear, his face pale with the realization that his daughter had just insulted the boss's chosen partner. Why did you do that? I asked, my breathing shallow as Nicholas pulled me closer. Our bodies pressed together. I was acutely aware of my size, of the thick softness of my stomach pressing against his rock-hard abdomen, of my heavy thighs brushing against his tailored trousers. Yet Nicholas didn't pull away. If anything, his grip tightened, possessing my curves with a possessive heat that made my head spin. Why did I put Vanessa in her place? Nicholas asked, his dark eyes locked onto mine. Because she is a parasite. My world is filled with women like her, starving themselves for aesthetics, trading on their fathers' names, entirely devoid of substance. I loathe them. When I look at you, Kara, I see a real woman. I see a brilliant mind encased in a body that demands to be noticed. You take up space, and you deserve every inch of it. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. No man had ever spoken to me like this. No man had ever looked at my body and seen power instead of gluttony. "But that's not the only reason I brought you here, is it?" I asked, my forensic instincts kicking in. The fairy tale was intoxicating, but I knew who I was dealing with. "You didn't send a mercenary to my cubicle at Grant Thornton just to give me a Cinderella moment." Nicholas spun us out of the center of the floor, moving us seamlessly toward the shadowy edge of the ballroom near the private elevators. "No, I didn't," he admitted, his voice dropping an octave, the romantic warmth instantly replaced by cold, tactical calculation. "Vincent Maroney knows you audited Apex Logistics. He knows you flagged the $4 million. A drop of ice-cold sweat rolled down my spine. "How?" "The audit was internal. Only my managing partner saw the report. Your managing partner owes $2 million in gambling debts to the Borgata in Atlantic City," Nicholas stated flatly. "Maroney bought the debt. Your boss handed over the audit report to save his kneecaps. Maroney knows you are the one who exposed him. And more importantly, he knows you haven't gone to the feds yet. He is in this hotel tonight, Kara. He came to buy his way back into my good graces, and he plans to offer me your head on a platter as an apology for his sloppiness." I stumbled, my heel catching on the carpet. Nicholas caught me effortlessly, holding me up against his chest. "He's here!" Panic seized my throat. "Then why did you bring me? You brought me here as bait." "I brought you here because my private security grid at the Pierre is impenetrable, and my men surround the perimeter. You are safer by my side than you would ever be in your Brooklyn apartment," Nicholas growled softly, his hand moving to cradle the back of my neck. "Maroney is a dead man walking. I just needed him to step into the trap, and I needed him to see that the woman he thought he could silence is now under the direct protection of the Castellano family." The music swelled to a crescendo. Nicholas guided us to a halt perfectly in time with the final note. The ballroom erupted into applause, though the clapping was stiff, nervous, and entirely deferential. Before I could process the magnitude of what he had just revealed, one of the massive bodyguards, a man with a heavily tattooed neck, stepped out of the shadows near the elevator bank. He leaned in and whispered something into Nicholas's ear. Nicholas's jaw clenched. The romantic facade shattered completely. The predator had arrived. "Take her upstairs," Nicholas ordered the guard. "Suite 804. Lock it down." "No," I said, grabbing Nicholas's forearm. The sheer audacity of touching a Mafia boss without permission made the bodyguard flinch. But Nicholas just looked down at my hand. "If Maroney has my boss's files, he doesn't just have the Apex ledger. He has my laptop. He has the decryption keys to my entire firm's network." Nicholas's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean, Kara?" "It means that if you kill him tonight without securing that data, he likely has a dead man switch," I said, my mind racing through the protocols. "He can initiate a mass dump of your laundering routes to the IRS and the FBI the second his heart stops beating. You need me in that room, Nicholas. I know how to disarm his servers." For a long, agonizing second, Nicholas stared at me. He was weighing the risk to my life against the collapse of his empire. "If a single bullet flies, you drop to the floor and do not move," Nicholas commanded, his voice like grinding stone. "Understood?" I nodded. We bypassed the party completely, stepping into the private, gold-paneled VIP elevator. The ride up to the 8th floor was suffocatingly silent. Nicholas checked the magazine of a matte black Sig Sauer he pulled from his tuxedo jacket, sliding it back into the holster with a terrifying, practiced ease. When the elevator doors slid open, the hallway was deserted. 2 of Nicholas's men were already positioned outside Suite 804, their weapons drawn and suppressed. Nicholas didn't bother knocking. He kicked the heavy oak door right off its hinges. The crash echoed like a bomb blast. I followed him into the suite, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The presidential suite was massive, decorated in opulent golds and creams. Standing by the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Central Park was Vincent Maroney. He was a weasel of a man in a cheap suit, sweating profusely. Standing between him and us were 3 armed mercenaries. "Nicholas!" Maroney squeaked, his voice cracking. He raised his hands in a placating gesture. "I didn't want it to come to this. I came to negotiate." Nicholas stepped into the room, his gun hanging casually by his side. "You steal $4 million from my docks, you buy off a civilian accountant's boss, and you bring guns into my hotel. Negotiation is off the table, Vincent." Maroney's panicked eyes darted to me, taking in my stained dress and heavy figure. A nasty sneer crossed his face. "So it's true. You brought the fat bitch, the little calculator who thought she could play with the big boys." Nicholas raised his weapon in a blur of motion. Thwip! Thwip! 2 silenced shots rang out. 2 of Maroney's mercenaries dropped to the carpet, blood pooling from perfect holes between their eyes. The 3rd mercenary instantly dropped his weapon and fell to his knees, correctly assessing that his paycheck wasn't worth his life. Maroney screamed, backing up against the glass window. "Call her that again," Nicholas whispered, walking slowly across the room. "Please. I want an excuse to shoot you in the stomach and watch you bleed out over the next 3 hours. "Wait!" Maroney shouted, pulling a small black remote from his pocket. His hand was shaking violently. "If my thumb comes off this button, an encrypted server in Panama sends the Apex ledgers and the ledgers for your union payouts straight to the Southern District of New York. You kill me, you all go to prison forever." Nicholas stopped. For the first time all night, I saw a flicker of genuine hesitation in the boss's eyes. Maroney had backed him into a corner, but Maroney hadn't accounted for me. I stepped out from behind Nicholas's broad shoulders. "Which server in Panama, Vincent? The one hosted by HostGator under the shell company Blue Horizon, or the backup server on the AWS cloud, using your wife's maiden name as the encryption key?" Maroney froze. The color drained entirely from his face. How do you?" I pulled my cell phone from my clutch. "I'm a senior forensic accountant, Vincent. You think I found the $4 million and just stopped looking? I've been monitoring your digital footprint for 3 weeks. When you bought my boss's debt yesterday, I knew you were coming for me. So I went into your network. I didn't just find your dead man's switch." I tapped the screen of my phone, holding it up. "I bypassed the biometric lock, severed its connection to your remote, and transferred all $15 million you have stashed in the Cayman Islands directly to a blind trust controlled by Nicholas Castellano." The silence in the room was deafening. I looked Maroney dead in the eyes. "You don't have a dead man's switch anymore, Vincent. You just have a piece of plastic. And you are broke." Maroney frantically pushed the button on the remote. Once, twice, 10 times. Nothing happened. No server ping. No confirmation text. Nothing. He dropped to his knees, sobbing. "Nicholas, please, please." Nicola didn't even look at him. He snapped his fingers, and his men dragged the weeping, ruined man out of the suite by his armpits. Maroney would never be seen again. The heavy doors closed, leaving just me and Nicholas in the quiet luxury of the suite. My adrenaline crashed. My knees gave out, and I slumped toward the floor. But Nicholas was there instantly. He caught me, lifting my heavy frame into his arms as easily as if I weighed nothing at all. He carried me to the velvet sofa and sat down, keeping me planted firmly on his lap. He didn't speak for a long time. He just stared at me, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with an intensity that terrified and thrilled me. "You hacked his servers," Nicholas finally breathed, his voice raw with awe. "I'm very good at my job," I whispered, shivering against him. Nicholas's hands came up, tracing the full curve of my hips, sliding up to cup my face. His thumbs wiped away a stray tear I hadn't realized I shed. "You aren't just good at your job, Kara. You are a queen," he murmured fiercely, "and you are never going back to a cubicle. You belong at the top of this empire. With me." He kissed me then. It wasn't gentle. It was a claiming, a deep, hungry, consuming kiss that bruised my lips and lit a fire in my blood. I kissed him back, wrapping my arms around his broad shoulders, finally letting go of the insecure girl who thought she took up too much space. In Nicholas's arms, my size was my power. An hour later, we walked back down to the grand ballroom. I didn't hide behind him. I walked beside him, my chin held high, the wine stain on my dress worn like a medal of war. As we descended the grand staircase, the elites of New York's underworld parted for us. I locked eyes with Vanessa Lombardi. She quickly looked down at her feet, terrified to even meet my gaze. I was Kara Higgins. I was fat. I was brilliant, and the most dangerous man in the city had just bowed to my mind. If Kara's triumph over the mean girls and her journey to becoming a ruthless Mafia queen kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that real power comes from the mind, not the waistline. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more thrilling, twisting audio dramas where the underdog takes the crown.